My name is Mike Thompson. I'm 52 years old, and I've spent 28 of those years driving on the American highways. I've seen everything out on those roads. Horrible accidents, storms that looked like the end of the world, desperate people begging for help. But what I'm about to tell you now, that changed my life forever. And I am absolutely certain it was a miracle from the Virgin Mary. It was December 15th, 2019, a Tuesday that started like any other, but that would end in a way I never imagined. If someone had told me this story beforehand, I would have laughed in their face. But when you live something like that, when you are an eyewitness, everything changes. You're going to think I went crazy. You'll say it was fatigue, hallucination, I don't know what. But I was lucid. More lucid than I've ever been in my life. And what happened that night? It won't leave my head. It never will. Before I begin, I need you to understand one thing. I wasn't a religious man. I had been raised in church, yes. My mother was devoted to Our Lady, but I had drifted away from faith many years before. I thought religion was for weak people, for people who needed emotional crutches. Now I want to ask you an honest question. Are you ready to answer Mary's call for your life? If your answer is yes, comment, "I'm ready for Mary's miracles." And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because here, miracles happen every day. To understand the story, I need to tell you what my life was like in those days. It wasn't good. It was not good at all. My wife Sarah had left me 3 months earlier. 22 years of marriage thrown away because, according to her, I loved the road more than my family. "Mike, you're never here," she used to say. "When you are, it's as if your mind is still in the truck." She wasn't wrong. I lived to work. I took every load that came my way, spent weeks away from home. I thought I was being a good provider, but I was a terrible husband and father. My son Jake, 16 years old, barely spoke to me. When I came home, he would lock himself in his room. Once I heard him talking to his mother. "What difference does it make that he's here? Tomorrow, he'll be gone again." That destroyed me inside, but I didn't know how to change. It was the only life I knew. 3 days before that trip, I received the divorce papers. Sarah wanted half of everything, including my truck, a navy blue Peterbilt 379 that was my pride. 20 years paying financing only for someone to want to take it in court. That week I was broke, not just financially, but emotionally. I couldn't sleep properly, couldn't eat properly. I lived on coffee and pain pills for my back. I had started drinking too. Never on the job, I never did that, but in motels, alone, a bottle of bourbon was my only company. I was sinking, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop. That run was from Phoenix to Atlanta, a load of electronics, a tight deadline, and payment I desperately needed to cover the divorce lawyer. I left Phoenix at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. The plan was to drive straight through, stopping only for fuel and the mandatory rest. I wanted to be in Atlanta by Thursday morning. The first part of the trip was normal. Interstate 10 East, Arizona scenery, scorching sun. My mind was on autopilot, foot on the accelerator, eyes on the road, radio playing country music. But as the day went on, that hollow feeling in my chest kept growing. I called Jake twice, no answer. I texted Sarah asking how he was. She replied, "Worry about your load." I stopped at a truck stop for lunch, sat at the counter and saw in the corner of the diner a father showing something on his phone to his son, the two of them laughing, the boy clinging to his dad's arm. It cut right through me. I remembered little Jake and couldn't finish my sandwich. I went back to the cab with a weight pressing on my chest. Back on the highway, I started thinking about how I had lost those moments with Jake. About how, in the name of providing for the family, I had lost the family itself. By afternoon, a storm rolled in. Not ordinary rain. It was a wall of water crashing down from the sky. Zero visibility. I had to slow to 40 miles an hour on a highway where I usually did 70. The radio started acting up. Only static came through. The AC went out. Inside the cab, it was an oven. I was sweating, nervous, with a pounding headache. That's when the dark thoughts started creeping in. I kept glancing at the drop-off to the right of I-40 and thinking, it would be so easy. One turn of the wheel, and it would all be over. No divorce, no debts, no pain. I had never thought like that before. I wasn't the type to give up. But in that moment, driving alone through the storm, it felt like there was no way out. The storm began to let up around 8 p.m., somewhere in Texas. I had pulled into a station to fuel up and was getting back on the road when I saw her. A woman standing alone on the shoulder of I-40 around mile marker 25. She was waving, clearly asking for a ride. My first reaction was to hit the gas and keep going. Rule number 1 for any trucker: never pick up hitchhikers, especially women alone on the highway. But something made me check the mirror. She was drenched from the storm. No umbrella, no luggage. Just a small bag slung over her shoulder. She wore a simple blue dress. I don't know what came over me. Maybe Christian guilt, I don't know. My mom always said, "Mike, help those in need. One day you might need help too." I pulled the rig onto the shoulder, about 50 yards ahead of her. In the side mirror, I saw her running toward the truck. When she reached the passenger door, I rolled down the window. "Where you headed, ma'am?" I asked. She smiled, a smile that... how do I even explain it? It was calm, peaceful, like she wasn't the least bit worried about standing alone on a dangerous highway in the middle of the night. "I'm going wherever you're going," she said. Her voice was soft with an accent I couldn't place. It wasn't Texan. It was different. "I'm headed to Atlanta." "That's a long way." "That's no problem. I can help with gas money." I unlocked the door. She climbed in with an ease that was almost unreal, like she weighed nothing at all. She sat in the passenger seat, placed the bag on her lap, and looked at me with those eyes. They were brown eyes, but they had a depth I had never seen in anyone before. As if she could see right through us, understanding things we ourselves don't even understand. "What's your name?" I asked as I returned to the road. "Mary," she answered simply. "Mary what?" "Just Mary." I found it strange, but I didn't insist. Everyone has their reasons for not wanting to share personal information. "What were you doing alone on the road?" I asked. She remained silent for a moment, gazing out the window. Then she said, "I was waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For someone who needed company." That gave me a chill. I didn't know why. Maybe because at that moment, I truly needed company. It had been weeks since I had spoken to anyone other than gas station attendants and clerks. I tried turning the radio back on, but all that came out was static. Mary noticed and said, "Sometimes silence is better than noise." "Don't you like music?" "I do, but I prefer the music that comes from within people, the words that come from the heart." I looked at her. She was a simple woman, must have been around 35, 40 years old, brown hair tied back in a ponytail. No makeup, nothing flashy. But there was something about her, a presence, as if she took up more space in the cab than her physical size suggested. "You seem tired," she observed after a few minutes. "I am. It's been a hard time." "Do you want to talk about it?" Normally, I would have changed the subject. I was never one to open my heart to strangers. But something in her voice, in the way she asked, it was as if she truly cared, and I began to talk. I told her everything. The divorce, the distance from my son, the loneliness, the dark thoughts I had had earlier. I said things I had never even said to myself. Mary just listened. She didn't judge, didn't offer cheap advice. Every once in a while she asked a question that made me think more deeply. "When was the last time you truly felt happy?" she asked. I thought for a long time. I think it was when Jake was little, about 8 years old. I had just come back from a trip, and he ran to hug me at the door. He said he had missed me. And why did you stop feeling that way? I don't know. Life just kept getting busier. Work got heavier. Jake grew up, became more independent. Or you became more distant, she said softly. It hurt, but it was true. Mary, I don't know how to fix things anymore. I feel like I'm in such a deep hole that I can't see the light anymore. She stayed silent for a while. Then she said, Mike, have you ever stopped to think that maybe this hole isn't a prison? Maybe it's a foundation. What do you mean? Sometimes we need to reach the bottom to discover what really matters, to find the solid rock upon which we can build a new life. I had never thought of it that way. I had always seen my problems as punishment, as failure. She was suggesting they could be opportunity. You miss your son, she continued. That is love. You regret hurting your wife. That is conscience. You want to change. That is hope. Mike, you haven't lost what matters. You've just forgotten where you kept it. Tears began rolling down my face. Tears I had been holding back for months. But how do I change? How do I win back their trust? 1 mile at a time, she said with a smile. The same way you drive this truck, 1 mile at a time. That's when things started to get strange. First, I realized I was no longer tired. I had been driving for almost 14 hours, but I felt completely alert, refreshed, as if I had slept for 8 hours. Second, my truck was running better than ever. The engine purred smoothly, without that little injector pump rattle that had been worrying me for weeks. The steering was light, the brakes responding perfectly. Third, and this really confused me, it was as if time had slowed down. I looked at the odometer, and I had traveled far more miles than seemed possible. Mary, I said, something strange is happening. What do you mean? I don't know. I feel like it's not just the two of us here in the cab, as if there were a presence. She smiled again. There always is, Mike. There always is. That's when I noticed the fragrance. A soft scent of flowers that hadn't been there before. It wasn't ordinary perfume. It was like the scent I remembered when I was a child and my grandmother took me to church on Sundays. Incense mixed with roses. Do you smell that? I asked. Smell what? Flowers, roses. Mary just smiled and kept looking at the road ahead. The radio, which had been nothing but static all night, suddenly began to play a song. It wasn't a normal station. There was no announcer, no commercials. Just a gentle song, sung by a choir that sounded heavenly. Do you hear that? I asked, pointing at the radio. I hear music all the time, she replied enigmatically. I tried to change the station, but I couldn't. The knob simply wouldn't respond. The music kept playing, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard in my life. As we continued on our journey, I felt something changing inside me. It was as if a weight I had carried for years was being lifted off my shoulders. I began to see memories of my life in a different way. I remembered the day Jake was born, how I cried with joy holding him in my arms. I remembered the first time I told Sarah that I loved her. I remembered why I had become a truck driver, not for the money, but for the freedom, for the beauty of the American highways. Mike, Mary said softly, do you want to know a secret? Of course. Your son still runs to the door when he hears your truck arriving. He just learned to hide because he doesn't want to be disappointed when you leave again. My heart stopped. How do you know that? And Sarah, she still keeps the love letters you wrote when you were dating. They're in a little box under the bed. She reads them when she misses you. Mary, who are you? How do you know these things? She looked at me with those deep eyes. I'm someone who cares about you, Mike. Someone who wants to see you find your way back home. But how? Some questions are less important than the answers they bring. The question is not who I am. The question is, who are you going to choose to be from now on? At that moment, everything became clear. I don't know if it was the conversation, the exhaustion, or something beyond my understanding, but I understood what I needed to do. I needed to stop running. I needed to go back home. Not just physically, but emotionally. I needed to fight for my family, even if it meant completely changing my life. "Mary," I said, "when I get to Atlanta, I'm going to deliver this load and head back to Phoenix. I'm going to talk to Sarah. I'm going to fight for my marriage. I'm going to cut back on the trips. I'm going to be the father Jake deserves." "I know you will," she said with a smile. "I've always known." It was almost 5 a.m. when we reached the outskirts of Atlanta. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky orange and pink. "Mary," I said, "where can I drop you off?" "Right here is fine." I looked around. We were in a commercial area, still closed at that hour. "Are you sure? This isn't a very safe place for a woman alone." "I'll be fine, Mike. I always am." I pulled the truck onto the shoulder. Mary picked up her small bag and turned to me. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life tonight." She smiled once more. "No, Mike, you saved your own life. I was just here to remind you that it was still worth saving." She stepped out of the truck and began to walk away. I watched her in the side mirror for a few seconds, then looked forward to check the traffic before pulling back onto the road. When I looked at the mirror again, she was gone. Completely. There was nowhere to hide in that area. It was all open. She had simply vanished. On the passenger seat, where she had been sitting, I found something that hadn't been there before. A small silver medal of the Virgin Mary. It wasn't anything elaborate, just a simple medal, but it was warm to the touch, as if someone had held it for a long time. I kept my promise. I delivered the load in Atlanta and drove straight back to Phoenix. I talked to Sarah. It wasn't easy, but we started couples therapy. I cut my trips in half. Jake is still reserved with me, but now we spend at least one weekend a month together. Last week, he asked me if he could come with me on a short trip during the summer vacation. I don't know who Mary was. Maybe an angel, maybe a messenger sent from heaven. But deep down, I have no doubt. That night I experienced a miracle of the Virgin Mary. I still keep the medal I found on the passenger seat. It hangs from my rear-view mirror. Every time I look at it, I remember Mary's words. 1 mile at a time. Sometimes when I drive alone on the roads at night, I still feel the fragrance of roses. Sometimes I hear that soft music on the radio. And in those moments I know, it wasn't an illusion. It was real. It was Our Lady reminding me that hope never dies, even when everything seems lost. If you are going through a difficult time, if you feel that you have lost your way, know this. The Virgin Mary continues to work miracles. Sometimes she appears in the most unexpected places, through people we would never imagine. And who knows, maybe one day, when you least expect it, she might also appear in your life. Now I invite you to a short prayer. Virgin Mary, Most Holy Mother, just as on that night you extended your gentle presence in the midst of the storm and loneliness, come also to meet the hearts that today feel lost. You who are the Mother of Hope, console those who weep, strengthen the weary, welcome those who no longer believe in themselves, and show them that life still has meaning. Teach us, O Mary, to live with faith, to love without measure, and to forgive without limits. May we never forget that, even in darkness, your motherly gaze guides us, and your heart leads us back to God. Beloved Mother, intercede for our families. Restore wounded homes. Bring parents and children closer together. Heal the wounds of the heart, and bring peace to the roads of life. And when we feel too tired to go on, hold our hands and lead us step by step, 1 mile at a time, to the safe harbor of your Son Jesus. Amen. Now I want to ask you, do you believe in the miracles of the Virgin Mary? If yes, write in the comments, I believe in the miracles of the Virgin Mary. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs hope. Together, we will spread faith and show the world that Our Lady continues to perform miracles in our lives. May the Virgin Mary bless you and your family, today and always. Amen.